All right, I thought since we didn't do a whole lot on this opening chapter, and since this is a new text and you guys are probably, well, you're not happy with it, I can tell. I thought I would provide you guys with an additional little kind of mini lecture to try and help clarify what's going on in this introductory chapter to representative bureaucracy, which is by Julie Dolan and David Rosenbloom. Initially, of course, again, the question is, what role does bureaucracy play within the governing process? And I think, if you've taken American government or any just kind of basic course, I think you understand that bureaucratic agencies occupy a kind of gray zone. They're not, they are part of the executive branch, but they're there because of the process of delegation. And there's a great deal of discretion that goes into that delegation process. There's a limit to what Congress can do. There's a limit to what presidents can do. And again, the question is, how do you try to ensure bureaucratic accountability and performance, and avoid, allowing the bureaucracy to become sort of an extension of authority, elitist kinds of approaches to government. It's the whole deep state kind of argument that so many people find so attractive. And I think the little brief writings kind of, the excerpts from longer writings really kind of highlights the tension that exists between the idea, first of all, that bureaucrats should simply be doing what they're told, while at the same time reflecting that if they don't have any kind of discretion, they can't get a lot done. And so the idea of representative bureaucracy, as I've mentioned, I think several times in class, is this notion that if executive branch agencies' composition is similar to that of the population, you're more likely to get responsiveness. And so, but again, as we'll learn over the course of the book, that's not a guarantee, because again, we can say, well, 90% of Black Americans believe in, accept the idea of affirmative action and civil rights as something that is needed to deal with a history of discrimination. But not every Black believes that. There are, and you could have some instances where you have, a bunch of Kanye Wests in the federal bureaucracy that don't believe in much of anything except their own personal advancement. And so you have to be careful in terms of making these kinds of arguments. So the theory is, and of course this is first really kind of highlighted in Kingsley's little excerpt, is this notion again that if bureaucratic agencies are diverse, that they're more likely to be responsive to the populations that they're administering. Now, this contrasts with, of course, Max Weber's classic views, which is that the bureaucrats do as they're told, that they are merely expressions and extensions of the formal branches of the government. That idea that bureaucrats are kind of discretionless cogs in a machine that simply do what they're told. Of course, it doesn't really reflect what we see, particularly in American government. And Weber being, kind of an early 20th century sort of a pioneer in both the fields of sociology and political science, really kind of reflects this notion that he's kind of reflecting a German, a very specific idea about how bureaucratic, agencies work. And of course, he's really kind of emanating out of even more of a Prussian kind of perspective. Kingsley, I think, that argument or that little excerpt is really fascinating to me because he's studying the British civil service, which really came into being in a highly aristocratic, highly elitist period. And what happened over the course of the 20th century was that as British politics became more democratic, it became more, the bureaucracy became somewhat more democratic. Now, there were obstacles, and that's a big part of what he's talking about, which is, women had difficulty getting access. Women were oftentimes remained at disadvantaged positions, and that's something that we'll learn when we get to the later readings, basically dealing with American government as well. Mosher's argument, I think, is again very important for reading the whole text, because he's the one that makes this very important distinction between passive and active representation within the bureaucracy, right? And there is this idea that on the one hand, a passive representative is not necessarily going to actively advocate for a particular set of perspectives, is not necessarily going to advance a set of agendas that's going to help their members of their identity group, whereas active representation is, I'm going into office to change things for my people, right? And that's again something that I think a lot of a lot of Americans and a lot of white Americans, frankly, don't like, and that's where this contrast between the idea of representative bureaucracy and meritocracy kind of come from. Okay, the last selection is by Samuel Krisloff, and again, it develops this idea of representative bureaucracy. First, again, by emphasizing that passive representation is not the only question of equal rights. Is not only a question of equal rights and opportunities, it's also related to legitimacy and to performance. Again, bureaucratic agencies, many of them, some of them have really easy jobs. Their jobs is, Social Security Administration. We give you money, right? That's nobody dislikes that. The IRS, on the other hand, has, perhaps the hardest job because they're taking money. Likewise, I think Krisloff, the quote that the editors use, the bureaucracy is still at least potentially more representative than other arms of government, and in at least some senses, it does in fact manage to be just that, more representative. So again, this notion, and Krisloff also again just directly takes on Weber's notion that bureaucrats have no, they're not humans, they're just cogs. Of course they're human beings. Of course they have subjective beliefs. And even more importantly, they are socialized into an organizational culture that gives them ideas about how they're supposed to behave, that in many ways guides their actions, right? And again, when you talk about individuals making mistakes, those are correctable. Those are, you can fire somebody, you can discipline them. But when you're talking about a problem that emanates from political, from the organizational culture, that's a much deeper seated issue that's much harder to deal with. Let's see. I think, again, I don't want you guys to feel like you have to memorize this stuff. A lot of the stuff is methodological in orientation. If you're interested in that stuff, go ahead. But I'm really more interested in you guys understanding which authors are pushing which kinds of arguments, why, and what are the complications for understanding how bureaucratic politics functions in the world, in the real world, not in some ideal world. So anyway, I hope this is useful. Again, we can start class next Tuesday, which next Tuesday is the 18th, or no, the 11th. Today's the 12th. The 18th. It is the 18th. So when we come back on the 18th, if you have any questions about this first chapter and the readings, please, I think we covered a little bit of it, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys understood what was going on in this this opening chapter. So again, hopefully this is useful for you, and we'll see what